When I was a kid, my family had a favorite restaurant in Cuyahoga Falls where we would gather for special events like Mother's Day and anniversaries and such. I always ordered the chicken a la king. And based on my memory, I have been unable to find any other restaurant that can compare. One very distinct memory I have of a meal there involved the passing of the basket of rolls, which were also delightful. But this one time, as the basket was passed, my grandfather, who was sitting next to me, leaned over and asked, pulling a pumpernickel roll from the basket, "Do you know why these rolls are this color?" I didn't. And he said to me, "Because they were made by colored people." Everyone else at the table knew differently. But to a 5-year-old, the story stuck for years. And no matter how cute and innocent the comment or joke was intended to be, it left me with the impression that what colored people do is different somehow from what white people do. And as a kid who was raised on the white bread standard of Wonder Bread, it would be years before I would connect that pumpernickel was not only a German word, but a German bread. Growing up, there were other images and stories and impressions that were added to the bank of tapes that are stored in my brain. Offhand comments made by my father, who was generally a tolerant person, but who made the occasional racial slur, using words like lazy, a description that was not reserved for any one race, but was assigned to Negroes, Spics, Indians, and Wops. And when my father was really going at it, sometimes he would use what we refer to today as the N-word. For my mother, the Jews were her target. And so, growing up in that household, I have all these historical tapes stored in my memory bank, which start playing sometimes when some switch gets flipped. I don't think I'm always in control of that switch. Something I am doing or something I am experiencing flips that switch, and like while sitting in my chair at home with the remote control, I have to start flipping through the channels to move my brain on to something else. But the tape starts playing. Prejudice is something that we are not born with, but definitely something we are born into. I would suspect that many of you also have family-produced channels that you have to flip through from time to time in order to not let those messages control how you think and act towards others. In part, that is why race relations takes so much time. Generation by generation, we have to clean up the nasty words and phrases and images that we pass on to our children. The household my children grew up in was intentionally different than the one that I grew up in. And Linda can tell similar stories of her family home and how she has had to work to turn off the tapes of what she heard and saw there. Hopefully, our children will continue the progression, as will our grandchildren. And that is why race relations not only takes time, but hard work. Racial harmony will not just magically happen. It has to be intentionally planted and nurtured, in large part it has been the witness and mission of the United Church of Christ that has been most helpful to me in this quest. The story of the Amistad, where New England Congregationalists banded together to pay for the defense of Africans who were forcibly taken to the United States to be sold into slavery. The risk of churches and individuals during the Civil War to secretly transplant runaway slaves to freedom in Canada. Soon after the Civil War ended, our predecessor denominations went to the South to help with the establishment of congregations to serve the former slaves and the establishment of what are today known as the historically black colleges to serve freed slaves in the South. Fisk University was founded in 1866. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and the 60s, including voters' and workers' rights. Throughout my lifetime, I have heard and read the words of such great United Church of Christ leaders such as Joe Evans, the first black president of the United Church of Christ who died just in the last couple of weeks at the age of 92. Andrew Young, protege of Martin Luther King Jr., U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations in the Carter administration, former mayor of Atlanta, and ordained United Church of Christ minister. Bernice Powell Jackson, former member of our National Collegium of Church Officers, currently working on the World Council of Churches staff. And Jeremiah Wright, retiring pastor of Trinity Church in Chicago, recently and widely known for remarks made that have received widespread press attention. Make no mistake about it, Jeremiah Wright has been a voice in the United Church of Christ for the past 40 years. He is the architect of the largest membership church in our denomination. He has been respected for his theology, his passion, his vision, his preaching and teaching, his ability to win people to Christ. He has also been one of those annoying people who won't go away, calling the United Church of Christ to speak and act honestly about matters of race and race relations. Like the prophet he is named after, he has the ability to rub our noses in the obvious. Like Moses, he has been given a vision of the promised land, and he has led a movement of people wandering through a desert filled with ravenous racists and poisonous power mongers. And like Moses, although he has been given the vision and has been the leader of the march, he may not be able to cross over to the promised land. That will be the task for others who are coming after him, because his tapes are running as well. And once in a while, a voice of the past comes pouring out of his mouth, like it did at the National Press Club. And he is wounded by the racial prejudice that was passed on to him and which has passed through his lips. Thank you, Jeremiah, for bringing us this far. You have been a good and faithful servant, and those whom you have trained up, those who have heard the hope of your sermons, those who have been students of your peace, those who have seen Christ because of your witness and example, will now take the lead. These children, who you have nurtured and mentored and disciplined, will now lead the church in the direction that you have set toward the goal which God gave you the privilege to see, the goal where we have been heading to following your lead.